Well, it's an understatement for to say I am fired up to be here. And anybody would be lying if they said they weren't fired up to be in Hawaii. But, the church here holds a very special place to me and to Gloria. Actually, Gloria and I were leading the church in Boston the year we sent the team out in 1989 to plant the church in Honolulu. And and obviously there have been a lot of ties through the years. Fast forward a ways, then of course Alt Wong and Adam Bodziak were elders here for a number of years. And Adam Bodziak is my son-in-law's dad. So we got a lot of ties here, but also it's interesting when you come here, when you go anywhere, you get relationships that are just wild and crazy. Talking about Deborah. Deborah was part of my adventure in South Central Los Angeles for 3 years. There weren't many white boys that lived there. But that was one of the highlights of our life, the 3 years that Gloria and I spent in South Central LA. And then from Boston, 25 years, the Grassos are here from Boston. And anywhere you go, if you're around long enough, you meet people that you intersect with from all over the place. And it's great to be back now with my oldest daughter, Kiara, here and doing her residency at Tripler. I made a deal with her last summer when she found out she was going to be coming here for 3 years. I said, Kiara, if you will get an extra bedroom, I'll pay the difference in the rent. And so I'm here to collect. But then also we've got Kaylee with us too, and Karina's here with us. And people find excuses to come to Hawaii. And so I am so fired up to be here. And you know what a highlight the prayer retreat was. Did you enjoy that? I've been around for a long, long time, and I have to honestly say I have never in my whole life been to a prayer retreat. But it was a highlight, and sort of the highlight of the highlights was the starlight time on Friday night. Just laying out under the stars and worshiping God and seeing it was very interesting with all the rain we had on Saturday that it was totally clear on Friday night. God just smiled on us and gave us that time there. But of course, we're talking about Proverbs. And I'm going to get around to Proverbs, I promise you today, but it's going to be from 30,000 feet, Proverbs, in overlooking. Most of you know who Freddie Mercury was. He was one of the greatest singers probably ever in terms of talent-wise, lead singer for Queen. And he died at age 45 from AIDS. Tragic life. But the last song that he recorded a few weeks before his death was called The Show Must Go On. And in that song, 2 times, he asked the question, does anybody know what we're living for? Does anybody know what we're living for? Several years ago, I was flying on a red-eye. Don't you just love red-eye flights? By the way, there are a lot of red-eye flights from Hawaii back to the States. But I was flying from Boston to London on a red-eye. And I sat next to a young woman, probably in her middle 30s. And it's a 6.5-hour flight. And we probably talked for 5 hours of that time. And it was one of the most interesting conversations that I've ever had, because this young woman was on her way back from South America. She had her PhD in oceanography, and she had spent some time in South America with Jacques Cousteau on a project. And she was going back home. She had her own TV show on oceanography on BBC regularly. Her hobby was racing cars. She had a good friend that had a yacht that she regularly went in the Mediterranean with on a yacht. And she was on her way back to go skiing in the Alps. And I'm not sure that I've ever met anybody in their 30s that was that accomplished. I mean, it was a very, very interesting conversation, and we got very deep. And when you talk with somebody for 5 hours, you get pretty deep. And I asked her, basically, we got around to some pretty serious stuff about life and some pretty deep questions about life. And I asked her the question pretty much that Freddie Mercury asked. What are you living for? What are your goals in life? What do you really want? And her answer really totally shocked me, because she said, I don't know. I don't really know what I'm living for. I have a lot of things in life that I've aimed for, that I've achieved, but I don't know what I want out of life. Now, if you take a survey in general population of people, what do you really want in life? What do you think the number one answer is? I want to be happy. That's the number one thing that people are looking for in life, is happiness. But the truth is, happiness is elusive. There's no way in this life you can say, everything is leading me to happiness. Why is that? Because happiness depends on circumstances. And you cannot control the circumstances in your life. I mean, overall, Gloria and I had, in our 56 years, a lot of happiness. But there were some things that were not happy. We lost 3 babies. That was a hard time. It was not a happy time. And I can honestly say, our goal, and I think for all of us, our goal is not to seek happiness. Now, probably we could give a lot of different answers, a lot of spiritual answers. But really, honestly, in your heart of hearts, what would you say you are living for? I mean, certainly one of the things is I want to go to heaven. I want to live for God. I mean, some almost pat answers that we come up with. But in your daily time alone with God and the Holy Spirit, what are you living for? What is it you really want? And in thinking about a concise answer, I came to the translation by Phillips of Romans 12, chapter 2, or chapter 12, verse 2, that I think says it probably more concisely than any other thing that I've been able to find. It says, don't let the world around you squeeze you into its own mold. Isn't that a trap in life? The world tries to squeeze us into its mold. But it says, let God remold your minds from within, so that you may prove in practice that the plan of God for you is good, meets all His demands, and moves towards the goal of true maturity. I think that pretty well just says it all. And that leads us then to Proverbs. Because a lot of what is said there in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, is what Proverbs is all about. You know, Proverbs is there to remold us. out of worldly thinking, to give us real value that God knows is true wisdom. In Proverbs chapter 4, verse 18. And you probably wonder about this topic, my title today, from midnight until noon. This is the reason for that title. Proverbs chapter 4 and verse 18. The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn that grows brighter until the full light of day. I mean, we really start our lives basically at midnight in the world. And the journey then begins when we accept Christ into our life, and that starts the process of moving from midnight to noon. But it's a journey. I'm 82 years old. I'm not there yet. Usually everywhere I go, I'm the oldest in the church. Anthony's mom now has got me beat, 90 years old. But 82 years, I've been around a long time. I'm not there yet. I'm on a journey. And hopefully, it's getting brighter and brighter and brighter as we go. Basically, God wants all of us to think of ourselves as learners. We're experiencing life and we're learning. We're getting wiser as we go on. I want us to take a few moments here to just highlight all of Proverbs. I'm going to highlight all of Proverbs in 3 minutes. Summary of Proverbs. I've broken it down basically into 31 different topics. There are actually more than that, but these are the main ones. Summary of Proverbs. Number 1, live in obedient devotion to God. Number 2, resist peer pressure that leads to sin. Number 3, actively seek wisdom. Number 4, accept wise advice. Now we're going to be talking about this. The main thing we're going to be talking about today is advice. Trust God with all your heart. Love God with an undivided heart. Honor God with your finances. Avoid ungodly speech. Stay sexually pure. Don't spread gossip and rumors. Examine yourself using God's standards. Be generous. Correct those who want to be corrected. Be consumed with awe as you worship God. Know the importance of the season of life that you're in. This is a big one, guys. Just when you think you've got life figured out, you change life. I'm no longer a married. I'm a widow. That's a whole new phase in my life. I'm still trying to figure that one out. Value correction. Put your confidence in trusted friends. And if you didn't get it the first time, be generous. I put that in there twice. Be teachable. Don't be reckless with your words. Encourage others. Finish what you start. Control your anger. Be kind to the poor. Don't hide your sin. Seek understanding. Seek advice. Listen before you speak. We used to, at our table when our girls were young, we would have a devotional once a week, and we have memory work where we'd all memorize something. And we did a lot of stuff from Proverbs. And one of the main things that our girls loved was Proverbs 18:13 that said, we used the Good News from Modern Man that said, listen before you answer. If you don't, you're being both stupid and insulting. That's the only time we ever allowed our girls to say stupid. But they use that verse against us quite often. When they wanted something, they would say, remember Proverbs 18:13. Be careful with alcohol. Dedicate your children to God and point them in the direction they should go. Work hard. Treasure a godly wife. You know, this pretty much encapsulates everything we believe in and what we want to become character-wise, doesn't it? There aren't many things you can think of that are not in that list. The challenge is, yeah, we know it, we can read it. The challenge is living it. The challenge is putting it into practice. For example, don't be reckless with your words. What does that mean? How do you do that? You got to grow in that one. Or honor your God with your wealth. Talking about finances. How do you do that? Be consumed with awe as you worship God. You know, it was so easy on Friday night to be consumed with awe with God as you look up at those stars. But that's not where we live all the time. Be kind to the poor. Stay sexually pure. How do I translate all those things into my daily life? That's really what I want us to talk about today. You know, we get into trouble thinking, especially here in the United States, I can do this without help. The prideful independence of me. I've got this. I'll figure it out. I can do it myself. You know, a good example of this is New Year's resolutions. You know, there's a lot of studies done on New Year's resolutions. How successful do you think, in general, New Year's resolutions are? In 12 months period of time, what percent of people would you guess keep their New Year's resolution that they make on January 1? 1 in 10. Only 1 in 10. In fact, half, less than half, keep them for 2 weeks. Good intentions. Hey man, I'm going to lose 5 pounds. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get more sleep. I'm going to be nicer. I'm going to be all these kind of things. It doesn't happen in general, and there's a problem that causes this. Proverbs 12 and verse 15 says, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. The problem is we think we can do a lot of things by ourselves, when in truth, God didn't intend for us to do them by ourselves. You know, guess what makes the biggest difference in being successful and trying to do things that you want to really change? That is this. It's having a partner who will hold you accountable. Now, I know some of you think, oh, there goes that word accountable again. I don't like accountability. You know, Anthony mentioned last week, I think, that Christianity is not a Lone Ranger religion. God never intended for us to be alone. That's why he created the church. That's why we have each other. That's why we need to rely on each other. And Satan wants you to believe you can handle it on your own. That's what Satan wants you to do. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 10. Ecclesiastes is really an extension of Proverbs. Solomon wrote them both. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 10 says, if one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. And we're all familiar with Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. You know, this is true even in the animal world. I read about a competition of, you know, in some places they have horse pulls. See how much a horse can drag. There was one that I read about in Canada that the winning horse was able to pull 9,000 pounds. The second place was pulled 8,000 pounds. And then they teamed them up. And you would expect the answer to be they would be able to pull 17,000 pounds. I mean, if one can do 9,000 and one can do 8,000, that'll be 17,000 pounds. Together, they pulled 30,000 pounds, almost twice as much as the two of them individually could pull. And that's the way, synergistically, that God intends for us to work. We can do more together, teamed up with each other, than we can ever do apart. To me, one of the most powerful lessons along this that I can think of was David and Jonathan. You remember the story of David and Jonathan? You remember King Saul, God had already rejected King Saul, and Saul was jealous of David because he knew that David was going to take his place. And so Saul tried several different times to kill David. And guess who David's protector was? It was Jonathan. Jonathan was the rightful heir to the throne. He was the guy who naturally would have taken Saul's place. But Jonathan was protecting David. And we read in 1 Samuel chapter 23 and verse 16, Jonathan helped David find strength in God. That's the partnership that I'm talking about. And the last stages of David's life, to me, are very sad. Because we're familiar with the sin that David fell into. We know about David and Bathsheba. We know that David lusted after Bathsheba. She was a married woman. He took her, he slept with her, he got her pregnant, and then he had her husband killed. And because of that, Satan won such a huge victory in David's life, and God basically said, your family is never going to be the same again. Your family's going to be totally messed up, and it was. His own family tried to overthrow David. Such a sad story, but I wonder if Jonathan had been around. See, Jonathan was killed with Saul. What if Jonathan had still been around in David's life? It could have been a totally different story. We'll never know. But obviously David didn't have anybody in his life, and so he was just waiting to be taken down by Satan. And that's the lesson that we all need to learn by ourselves. We're going to get taken down by Satan. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17 says, iron sharpens iron. One man sharpens another. You know, there were two things that drew Gloria and me to the Boston church. We were actually in a mainline Church of Christ a few miles from the Boston church in its early days. The two things that drew us was, number one, was the hardline belief in the lordship of Jesus Christ. That was unique because sort of the idea was where we were, hey, people will grow into that of making Jesus Lord. There was a hardline belief before you're even baptized. You've got to make that decision to make Jesus Lord. That's what we believe today. That's what all of you believed, right? You made Jesus Lord of your life. But the other thing that drew us was discipleship. It was accountability. Because where we grew up, it was nobody's business what I did. I still remember one guy who was asked about his quiet time said, it's none of your business. There was a current belief that it's my business, not yours. And so the fact that they practiced discipleship, being in each other's lives, helping each other, that drew us because Gloria and I knew we needed that accountability in our life. Now, we're surrounded by accountability, guys. Whether you like accountability or not, we're surrounded by it. For those of you who are students, you get a lot of accountability. Homework, exams, it's going to come. It'll determine whether you pass or not. At work, You know, your review is going to depend on how you do. And if you think it's not important for you to get to work on time, just wait till review time and see what happens. Of course, in the world of addictions, accountability is the only thing that works. I mean, people who are addicted to alcohol, AA, believes basically you've got to have an accountability partner. In terms of self-improvement, if you want to lose weight, the odds are you're not going to lose weight on a self-help program. If you really want it to be effective, get an accountability partner. It's even true with doctors. Don't your doctors hold you accountable? It may not be perfect, but they say, you know what, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to take this medication, you do whatever. And we listen to them. And this is true in so many areas of life, and yet somehow we reject it in our spiritual lives. We have the idea, I can handle this on my own, or if I need help, I'll ask for it. Somebody did a study in terms of New Year's resolutions. I already said that only 1 out of 10 are successful a year later. Do you know what with accountability that rises to? 95%. 95%. If you really want to change and you want to make a resolution, get some help and get somebody to hold you accountable. Now, I want to get pretty negative here for a minute because it's an area that I have major concern in the church today. Bottom line, all of us have been around long enough to know that Satan is going to hit you with something that you can't handle by yourself. Don't know what it is. It's probably different for all of us. But there's something. Satan's already got a plan for your life. He's already got it planned out how and when and where he's going to hit you. And if you're alone, the chances are he's going to knock you down pretty hard. And the thing I want to talk about for a few moments is porn. There is a report out, it's only been out a couple of years, by the Borna Research Group, which is the primary research group in Christendom today. They did research across thousands of churches in the United States. And this is what they found out. 11 years old is the age that the child will first be exposed to porn. 11 years old. Now, a lot of times it's by accident. 94% of kids will have seen porn by the time they're 14 years old. Now, here's a surprise. Almost 2/3 of American divorces involve one party having obsessive interest in pornographic websites. Now, here's another surprise. 7 out of 10 church-going men watch porn on a regular basis. 7 out of 10. 50%, here's even more surprising, 50% of pastors watch porn on a regular basis. On young Christian adults, 18 to 24 years old, 3 out of 4 regularly watch porn. 9 out of 10 Christian women have watched porn. I took a survey in LA back in the 90s for our office staff of men. At that time, it was about 15 men. And I asked them anonymously to just turn it on paper. Those that had a problem with porn. This is in the LA church. 50% had a problem with porn. This is back in the 90s. And it's gotten a lot worse since then. Get this. This is probably the main thing I want you to hear on this. Over half of pastors say that porn addiction is the most damaging issue in the church today. Let that soak in. Now you say, well, we're the ICOC. We don't have a problem with that. Don't kid yourself. It may not be as high a percentage, but we got a problem with it because it's a problem in society because it hits you in the face. Even when you don't look for it, it hits you. And if half of pastors in the religious world today say that the number one problem in Christendom is pornography, we got a problem. And we better address it. A good friend of mine, his name is David Widener. He and Robin, some of you may have heard of them, they have a ministry for pornography. And the reason they have a ministry is because David suffered from porn addiction for a number of years that almost cost him his marriage. They were at the point of divorce. And he finally got help. Do you know what his answer was? Just exactly what we were talking about. He tried for 15 years to beat it. He finally did it, and the way he did it, he got someone to hold him accountable every single day. He had a brother who every day asked him, have you given in to porn today? Have you been tempted with porn today? Only then, over a period of several years, was he able to say, I'm really over it. Now, here's also a problem. Today, you don't have to necessarily go to porn sites to see porn. You can be faced with porn pretty much anywhere you look. Netflix, you can find porn on Netflix. You can find porn on Hallmark. Don't kid yourself. You see, our standards have changed a lot. Back when I was growing up, believe it or not, we did have TV back then. But back then, the rules of TV were that a married couple could not be shown in the same bed together. So you had a husband and a wife sleeping in twin beds next to each other. I mean, now it's not unusual at all for a PG-13 movie to show bare breasts. And if you think that doesn't cause you a problem, brothers, you're crazy, you're lying. And so we got to realize we are surrounded with this, and we need help. You're not going to be able to totally avoid, you can avoid pornographic sites, but you can't, the way people dress today and whatever, and you're living on the beach and the way people dress on the beach and whatever, you're going to have some struggles. I don't care. And used to, 10 years ago, it wasn't so much women. You know what? In terms of people under 25 now, as many women watch pornography as men. So it's becoming a woman issue also. And so I'm harping on this because this is serious. And the only way I know to defeat it is to have an accountability partner who regularly is in your life. And I'll say, if you don't have one, you're crazy, if I can be pointed. Because Satan is out for you. Now, that's the negative part. Let's go to the other part of accountability. Accountability is not only for your protection, to help you with the negative things, but it's also to help us for our growth. Remember, we're going from midnight to noon, to the broad daylight. God's expectation is for us to grow in our time with God. The prayer retreat was so good for that. They introduced to me your 3-year initiatives. Those are great things. Those 10 initiatives are great things. They're great goals. But it would be great for you with a prayer partner, a discipleship partner, to talk about those things. How can you grow in those ways? Now, let me also say this, because I know a number of you have discipleship partners, but I've also been around long enough to know a lot of these discipleship partners meet once every 2 weeks. That ain't going to get the job done. I'm talking about really being in each other's life, really knowing each other, really being vulnerable with each other. And I've got a discipleship partner He's in Phoenix. I'm here. We talk every single day. We understand our struggles. We've done it for years together. And I really want to encourage you on that. Hebrews chapter 3, you're familiar with this, says we need daily encouragement. We all need that. But he also says why. It says, so we don't get hardened by sin's deceitfulness. Satan is there trying to take us out, and it's very subtle. And we can feel like, well, I don't have the time for this. How can you say I don't have time for this when it's such a major issue? Or we can say, well, if I need help, I'll get it. It's too late. When you finally come to the realization you need help, you needed to get help a whole lot before you got to that point. Or you can say, well, no one's available. I mean, I can't expect the elders to get with me or whatever. You know what? You don't have to have somebody who's been around the church 30 years. It was very interesting. One of the highlights of what Gloria and I did for a long time was we got with newlyweds for the first year of their marriage. And we'd get together with them once a month, usually about 10 couples at a time. And they'd be in that group for a year until they graduated. And then at the end of the year, on the graduation, they'd address the rest of the group what they had learned in that year. And we started off in that thing. Initially, Gloria and I would give a lesson. But what we noticed was, inevitably, out of 10 couples, one couple had come in and just had a good fight. And they got to be where they're very vulnerable with the group, and so they'd share their fight. And we started off, Gloria and I would then give them advice. But after a while, we said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to ask the group for advice. And we started saying, okay, here's the situation. Here's what happened. Group, what would you tell them? You know what? These are newlyweds, and as a group, they knew what to do. Why? Because they weren't emotionally involved. It's not rocket science. Living the Christian life is not rocket science. You pretty much basically know the right thing to do. But we get emotionally involved, we get sucked down by Satan, we get trapped, and we need somebody objective that loves us and is willing to speak the truth to us in love. That's really the lesson for today. I could go on. You don't want me to go on. But what I really want to convict you of and convince you, you need a partner. You say, well, I've got my wife or I've got my husband. That's great. That's not what I'm talking about. And the reason that doesn't really work very well, because as a husband and wife, you're emotionally supportive of each other. You need to be. You don't need to have objective eyes with each other. You need to love each other regardless. You need somebody in your life that is a mirror for you that can see objectively that's not emotionally involved with you. So husband and wife, be open with each other. But what I'm talking about here, you don't need to talk with your husband or wife about porn. That's not constructive. You need a brother or sister that can really help you in that. And so, guys, that's the lesson for today. And like I say, Proverbs is so great. It's such a great book, but it really gives us the guidelines for life. And it teaches us where we need to go so we can reach the full light of day. Amen. Love you all.